Good morning, everybody. Our author today will be Edward Morgan Forster. Edward Morgan Forster was born in London, the son of an architect. He was born in 1879 and died in 1970. He was educated at Thornbridge School. He studied classics and history at the King's College in Cambridge. The experience of travels in Greece and Italy constitute the background of his first two novels. The first one in 1905 is Where Angels Fear to Tread, and the second one in 1908, A Room with a View. Both of these express what was to become a favorite theme of him, the need for a strong and fulfilling human relationship, usually placed in classical and Mediterranean countries, in contrast with the Edwardian narrow-mindedness, intolerance, and Philistinism. For Philistinism, you have to look at the video about Dickens. This was at the heart of that milieu of Edwardian homosexual and Philhellene company, society, in which Forster matured. Forster was homosexual himself. He wrote a beautiful novel entitled Maurice, but he was afraid of publishing it because he remembered what had happened to Oscar Wilde, and so the novel was published only after his death, Maurice. Howard's End, 1910, is generally accepted as one of his finest artistic achievements, and a further attack on narrow-mindedness and upper-class prejudices. It is set in a pre-First World War London and its countryside. In 1912, he traveled to India, and his experience, together with a later stay there in 1922 as secretary to the Maharaja of Devas, produced A Passage to India, the last novel, published in 1924, but begun before the First World War. And this is by far the most ambitious of all Forster's work. The novel is an extended comparison of English colonial attitudes with those of the Indians themselves. The Hindu openness to feeling, to experience, to religious awe is contrasted with the practical English hardness designed to maintain and exercise power. In 1927, he delivered a series of lectures at the Trinity College in Cambridge, which were published then in 1927 under the title Aspects of Novel. This is a lucid inquiry into the art of storytelling. He is considered one of the greatest modern English writer and one of the most influential members of the Bloomsbury Group. Forster shows a sincere and profound devotion towards his craft as a writer. His deep concerns with the dilemmas of European civilization makes his work in some regards similar to that of D.H. Lawrence, the author of Women in Love, Sons and Lovers, and Lady Chatterley's Lover. Only Connect, which is the title of a very famous manual for English literature that is currently adopted in many schools in Italy. Only Connect is the epigraph main theme of Howard's End. His personal way of putting in simple terms the urgent, difficult task of achieving a sane interpersonal exchange in the midst of an overpowering modernity. Forster's way of dealing with this task is to envisage a humanist power which can connect people beyond boundaries of nation, empire, and class. This is made explicit in Passage to India, particularly in its sympathetic understanding of Indian mentality and the humility in the face of the Indian culture, quite rare for a work of that time. But apart from its literary merit, the novel served a social function in that it smoothed the road for British acceptance of the more vigorous political brand of pacifism represented by Gandhi. Two of the novels that Forster wrote before A Passage to India are set, at least in part, in Italy. In them, the writer examines men and women from two different cultures, Italian and English, who get in touch and through the comparison of differences and similarities acquire a greater awareness of themselves. The process sometimes occurs gradually and sometimes by illumination, but in both cases the story, which has been built up with realistic exactitude, is transformed into the statement of some universal truth. It has been said that Forster failed to produce the great novel until he found the right setting capable of constituting a wider and more significant background for his symbols. India was that setting. The vastness of its lands, the majesty of the Ganges, the almost primeval aspect of the Marabar Caves on one side, the difficult coexistence of different races and cultures complicated by the British Raji, the British rule, on the other side, constituted a universe that he could subject to precise criticism, and that could be more easily interpreted in a symbolic key. But the Marabar Caves are the privileged place of the story. They are described by the narrator in separate chapters. They are naively boasted of by Aziz, who wants to treat his English friends with something exceptional. They are the place where Mrs. Moore's revelation and Miss Quest's incident occur. In a way, the caves represent the soul of India, and what happens there is the symbolic representation of the Europeans' difficulties in understanding it. The characters. In his collection of essays, Aspects of the Novel, Forster made the famous distinction between flat characters and round characters. A Passage to India offers examples of both types. Aziz, Mrs. Moore, Adela Quested, and Fielding, a friend of Aziz and of the two ladies, are round characters. They are rich and complex. They have contradictory reactions and irrational behaviors. They change in the course of the novel, just like real human beings. Mrs. Turton, her husband, the members of the English community, and some of the Indians are, on the contrary, flat characters. In Mrs. Turton, the author draws a caricature of the typical Anglo-Indian woman, exaggerating her rudeness and snobbery and hinting at her frustration. She can behave with such arrogance only because she is in India. In England, she would be only one of the unimportant many. The narrator. The story is told by an omniscient narrator in the best 19th century tradition. The narrator knows everything of the lives, thoughts, and feelings of his characters and does not hesitate to intrude with his comments, his interpretations of the events and of history. He guides our sympathy towards unconventional, especially for the times, views of society and declares his belief in the basic goodness of human nature. Yet he never supplies the reader with ready-made answers, but rather suggests possibilities and solutions in the forms of questions, leaving him the final responsibility for the choice. The point of view shifts from one character to another. The scene at the mosque, for example, is seen from Aziz's point of view. The episode at the caves is narrated mostly from Mrs. Moore's point of view. As for Adela's incident, it is first reported in what seem to be official terms. It is then variously discussed by several characters, and only in the end the incident is seen, or rather relieved, from Adela's point of view during the trial against Aziz. And finally, I would like to say something about the scenes and the pictures you have been watching during the clip. They are taken from 1884 movie by David Lean, A Passage to India. David Lean was the same director that had directed Lawrence of Arabia. When this movie came out in 1884, he was praised worldwide. The making of the movie was a little bit tricky because Forster didn't want to have the book made into a film. He was afraid that any who would direct the movie would take sides either with the English or with the Indians. After his death, he left the rights of his book to Cambridge, to a Cambridge committee, and the people in Cambridge didn't want to give the rights up until 1980. And it was only then that the movie industry had green light into making the book a movie. At first, a contract was stipulated with Santa Rama Rao, who would write the screenplay. This Indian author had already written a script for the theatre, and she had been directly charged by E.M. Forster with preserving the spirit of the novel. But the first script she produced didn't satisfy neither the producer nor the director, because both considered the work too literary and too worldly, and basically unsuitable for a film. In fact, most of the scenes took place indoors, in offices, while David Lean had in mind a film in outdoors as much as possible. He said that the title of the film, A Passage to India, is in some sort a blessing, because it evokes landscape, colors, life, and so the audience would expect something of the like. So he also said that not only is a blessing, but it's also a danger, because the audience expects to see something that is very romantic, and so presenting what was in the book, that is the pre-independence India of a poor man, wasn't worth the amount of money necessary to make the book into a film. However, during 1982, Lin worked on the script and spent 6 months in New Delhi to have a close feeling of the country while writing. The filming took place from November 1984 to June 1984. One curiosity: the Marabar Caves that are present in the book had been modeled on the Marabar Caves, an actual place in India. But when the troupe went to see the location, didn't find this place suitable for the movie, and so they changed the location, and they used other caves near Bangalore, and the small cave entrances that we see in the movie were actually carved out by the production company. And finally, I would like to make a clear point about the themes that are present in this book. The book, and the movie as well, is on two different planes. The one is a symbolic one, the other is a realistic one. And to these two planes correspond themes, or group of themes. The first theme is the interaction between individuals and social setting, or a social situation that put to the test their qualities and set of values. That is what happens to Aziz when accused of attacking Miss Quested in the Marabar Caves, and this is also what happens to Mr. Fielding when he decides to side with Aziz and is ostracized by his country English fellow man. And this is what happens to Adela when she finally finds the truth of the incident herself. She realizes that nothing had happened. Consequently, she withdraws the charge and is abandoned by everybody, including her fiancé Ronnie, and including Aziz as well, who cannot understand her behavior, and the whole English community. The social aspect is narrated with precise realism, always accompanied by a vein of irony and even satire. Then the second theme is less translatable into words and remains vaguer, and is often alluded to through symbols. This second theme is essentially the necessity of human relationship or rather the failure of human relationship, both on an individual level and on a broader plane, for example, between races and peoples. Connected with these themes, there's the theme of loneliness, and in spite of their respective good and authority, all the protagonists of the novel are alone with themselves. Miss Quested is interested in the real India and has the polite willingness of a curious nature, but she is in fact frightened by what the caves reveal to her about herself. She is unable to love, and her soul is basically empty. We see that as well in the scene in the movie when she first refuses, then accepts his fiancé Ronnie. We don't really get at her heart, probably because her heart is empty. It happens, unfortunately, to somebody. Mrs. Moore, the protagonist basically, Mrs. Moore's interest is in mankind in general, and her friendship with Aziz is sincere and lasting. They start at the mosque, in the mosque scene during the night, with this famous passage, God is here, when both meet there by chance to worship the same God, even if they belong to different religions. After the shocking experience in the first cave, however, she runs away. She has a sort of a panic attack, we would say nowadays, and she falls into a state of apathy. Probably this is a foreshadowing of her death, and she is sent back to England by her son. Before the trial begins. This is one of the most delicate part. Mrs. Moore, who is acclaimed, for example, in the movie, as would be the perfect witness to discharge Aziz, is actually non-present at the trial. She has come back to England. And she will die on board the ship after having had the intuition of the unity of the universe. This we have difficulty in getting through the movie, not so much as in the book, but if we think about those scenes when she looks at the Ganges and the corpses that emerge from the Ganges, or the image of the moon, or the image of the sea, we can get through the pictures, what the idea of Forster was, which was in fact to give her the perception, the illumination, we would say in Joyce's terms, the epiphany of the unity of all universe. And also Aziz and Fielding are alone, and even if they are sincerely attached, at the very end of the book and the movie, they have to accept that there isn't any possible real dialogue on an equal basis between the two cultures. And that's all for Passage to India. Hope you have the chance to read the book or watch the movie. Incredible movie. If you liked the lesson, please remember to subscribe. You find the link down here. Inscribe and activate the bell, so you have direct access to literature videos, grammar videos, CLIL videos. If you are a student, teachers, or simply a curious person, that's the channel for you. Bye.